Belmont clan will hunt the night!
The iconic video game series Castlevania has enthralled gamers for over 3 decades with its timeless battle between the Belmont bloodline and the all-powerful Dracula. Developed and published by Konami in 1986, Castlevania has established itself as one of the most enduring and beloved franchises in the gaming world, spanning generations of consoles and platforms. Its popularity even led to a successful Netflix animated adaptation that concluded in 2021 with a spin-off series titled Castlevania Nocturne, which has recently made its thrilling debut on screen, promising to continue the epic feud of the vampire-killing Belmont clan. As you know, the narrative of the Castlevania universe traverses time and space from the 11th century Transylvania region of Wallachia to the 21st century outskirts of Tokyo, Japan. Now, this rich history is indeed vast and intricate, spanning centuries in the eternal struggle between good and evil. From the heroic Belmonts to the enigmatic Alucard, a slew of characters have risen to challenge the big bad vampire Dracula, the Prince of Darkness himself. So naturally, with time, the gaming series with its sequels and prequels have woven a complex web of interconnected stories, resulting in a pretty convoluted timeline. While us fans eagerly await the possibility of more Castlevania adventures in the future, we do think now is the perfect moment to journey back in time and explore the fascinating history of the vampire killers. Now, in this video, we will specifically explore this intricate timeline in detail, ranging from its inception during the Crusades to the impending final showdown with Dracula and the forces of darkness in the near future, set in a distant corner of the globe. To give you a much clearer understanding of this otherwise confusing timeline, we will also try to explore how the video game series' narrative aligns with its animated adaptation on Netflix and draws inspiration from the world of myths and monsters that have captivated gamers for decades. However, it is important to note that this exploration is exclusively focused on the main timeline of Castlevania games presented in chronological order to avoid obvious confusion. By that, we mean we're not going to venture into non-canonical reboots and remakes such as the Nintendo 64 games and the Lords of Shadow series, because let's just be honest, their impact on the timeline was lukewarm at best. Okay, so that's enough talking without wasting another moment. Let's get right into it. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin.
Minion!
When and how did all the vampire hunting exactly begin? The Leon Belmont era in 1094, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. First released in 2003 on PlayStation 2, Castlevania Lament of Innocence documents the earliest chapter in the expansive Castlevania timeline, which unfolds in the 11th century during a tumultuous period marked by feudal strife and knightly valor. Two valiant knights, Leon Belmont and Matthias Kronqvist, stands out as leaders of a powerful company that skillfully blends Leon's martial prowess with Matthias' strategic genius. This was a time when chivalry was still a defining code, yet the power of medieval monarchs waned due to territorial disputes and warring nobility. The tale begins with Leon Belmont's beloved Sarah falling prey to the clutches of a powerful vampire named Walter Bernhard, who resides in a castle shrouded in eternal darkness. Leon's devotion to his love prompts him to renounce his allegiance to the church and embark on a quest to rescue her. Along this treacherous journey, he receives invaluable assistance from Ronaldo, who bequeaths him the Whip of Alchemy. Unfortunately, Leon arrives too late to save Sarah, who is now cursed to become a vampire herself. Sarah goes on to make a selfless sacrifice, infusing her doomed soul into the iconic vampire killer whip that will be a central artifact throughout the Castlevania franchise. Now, Leon, driven by vengeance, confronts Walter Bernhard and ultimately succeeds in vanquishing the vampire with a weapon forged from Sarah's very essence. Yet the tragedy doesn't end there. It is revealed that the plot was a sinister design orchestrated by Matthias Kronqvist, Leon's trusted friend who had undergone a transformation into a vampire as an act of revenge against God, who had allowed his wife Elisabetha to perish from an illness, leading him to forsake his humanity. Matthias, driven by dark desires, fully embraces his newfound immortal nature. This pivotal transformation solidifies him as the eternal adversary of the Belmont family. The following centuries bear witness to the enduring battle between the Belmonts and the forces of evil evil as Leon Belmont becomes a vampire hunter embarking on a relentless pursuit of Dracula. Across generations, the mantle of vampire killer and the title of vampire hunter are handed down, but the Belmont's abilities and mission lead them to a life of exile and ostracism from society as they are both revered and feared. Unbeknownst to the Belmonts, each demon vanquished in their quest only served to amplify Matthias's powers. During this time, Matthias, now growing in strength and wisdom, assumed the title of King of the Night and underwent a transformation in identity, adopting the moniker of Dracula Vlad Tepes. Dracula bids his time in foreign lands, patiently waiting for the opportune moment to unleash his malevolent might upon the world. In the annals of Castlevania lore, Lament of Innocence stands out as an experimental title, deviating from the established formula. While previous handheld entries adhered to the Metroidvania style introduced by Symphony of the Night, this installment dared to bring that gameplay style into a 3D environment. It masterfully blends elements from classic titles like Resident Evil and God of War, earning praise from fans. Moreover, it delved deep into the origins of the entire Castlevania narrative, adding a layer of intrigue to the series. Dracula unleashes his wrath upon the world. The onset of the Trevor Belmont era in 1476 AD, Castlevania 3: Dracula's Curse. The genesis of humanity's dire struggle against Count Dracula unfolds in Castlevania 3: Dracula's Curse, released in 1989 on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Despite Dracula's momentary defeat, he endures through the centuries, accruing power and eventually remarrying a human healer named Lisa in 1455, fathering a son named Adrian. Tragically, this union culminates in the murder of his wife, who was burned at stake by humans, igniting Dracula's vengeful war upon the earth. When its sinister vampire launches a genocidal campaign against mankind, alarmed by the impending catastrophe, the Eastern Orthodox Church assembles a covert team with a mission to track down and eliminate Dracula. Despite their relentless efforts, every attempt to suppress the vampire lord ends in failure. Till this point of time, the Belmont family faced near extinction and exile due to their relentless pursuits of monsters. But faced with dire circumstances and no alternative, the church turns to the Belmont family, hoping that they possess the power to vanquish Dracula. Trevor Belmont, the only surviving member of the Belmont clan, emerges as the champion of this perilous quest by wielding his family's legendary whip. His unwavering determination drives him to embark on a journey to confront Dracula, which necessitates an alliance with Dracula's own son, who now adopts the name Alucard, along with the alchemist mage Sypha Bolnatis and the nimble thief Grant. Together, they unite to confront and ultimately vanquish Dracula, delivering the world from the clutches of evil, at least for the time being. This gripping narrative serves as the foundation for the Castlevania animated series on Netflix and remains a cherished storyline among fans. With the animated series being renowned as the best video game adaptation ever seen, Castlevania 3 is often regarded as the pinnacle of the original NES trilogy. Its allure lies in the diversity of characters, their unique abilities, and the fluid gameplay, making it an enduring classic. However, it is also renowned for its powerful challenges, often pushing players to the limits of their skills and determination. The chaos bought after Dracula's temporary demise. Castlevania Curse of Darkness, 1479. Curse of Darkness documented the aftermath of Dracula's death and was released in 2005 on Xbox and PlayStation 2. Despite Trevor Belmont's heroic victory over Dracula, the vampire lord's curse still plagues the European countryside, chaos in the form of disease, mob violence, and heresy. Amid this turbulent backdrop emerges Hector, a devil forge master who once served Dracula but grew disillusioned with the Count's ruthless methods, eventually choosing to live among humans. Hector's life takes a tragic turn when his wife is tragically killed, and the blame falls upon his fellow devil forge master Isaac. Driven by a thirst for vengeance and determined to settle the score, Hector embarks on a perilous journey to confront Dracula's stronghold. However, an unexpected revelation alters the course of his vendetta. It becomes apparent that Isaac orchestrated Hector's resurgence of devil forging abilities with a hidden motive to facilitate the return of Dracula's castle to the human world. Now Death, Dracula's loyal right hand, intends to use Isaac as a vessel for Dracula's resurrection and believes that once Isaac succumbs to Dracula's curse, his body will serve as a safe conduit for Dracula's return. However, Hector awakens to the realization that his unrelenting quest for revenge is an extension of Dracula's curse's manipulation and resolves to no longer be a pawn, thus sparing Isaac's life. Frustrated by Hector's defiance, Death opts for an alternative vessel using Isaac to facilitate facilitate Dracula's rebirth. Nevertheless, Hector confronts his former master, ultimately sending Dracula back to his eternal rest by performing the final forging, summoning the curse's essence and extinguishing it, putting an end to Dracula's menace once again. Following the success of Lament of Innocence, Konami continued in a similar vein, employing the same formula in Curse of Darkness. In this installment, Hector wields a sword, delivering a distinctive gameplay experience in the absence of the traditional whip. Curse of Darkness and Lament of Innocence served as precursors to the Lords of Shadow reboot series, maintaining the tradition of 3D adventures with elements of hack-and-slash gameplay. Dracula rises from the grave to haunt humanity once again, beginning of Christopher Belmont's era in 1576 AD, Castlevania The Adventure. A century after the defeat of Count Dracula at the hands of Alucard, the ominous legend is validated that once every 100 years, when the fate of God is forgotten, Dracula will come back to life. This time, the burdening task of confronting the Prince of Darkness falls upon Christopher Belmont, a descendant of Trevor and Sypha, who embarks on a solitary quest to thwart the vampire's resurrection and vanquish him once and for all. Unlike his forebearer, Christopher's narrative is notably more straightforward, constrained by the limitations of the original Nintendo Game Boy back when this game was released in 1989. His journey unfolds as he traverses a perilous landscape, confronting menacing monsters and ultimately seeking to eradicate Dracula's looming menace. Eventually, it becomes evident that Christopher's success in obliterating the vampire is not as resolute as initially believed. However, the game's simplicity is not confined to its narrative. It extends to its overall gameplay and design. While it offers an enjoyable experience, it has faced criticism for feeling like a somewhat diluted addition to the pre-existing Castlevania series. This gameplay lacked the swift tempo of its predecessors, the environments lacked vibrancy, and the sound design left room for improvement. This departure from the series' established standards left some fans yearning for the depth and quality that had come to define Castlevania games. Dracula turns a Belmont into a demon. Castlevania II: Belmont's Revenge in 1591 AD. Before we begin, it is important to note that this installment should not be confused with Castlevania II: Simon's Quest, which is a much later entry in the timeline, despite the fact that it was released before the game we're discussing. The Castlevania series has a knack for intricate narratives and confusing timelines, and such complexities are not even surprising at this point. Anyways, set in the late 16th century, the sequel to the original Game Boy title released in 1991, unfolds as Dracula, having narrowly escaped Christopher Belmont's clutches, retreats to recuperate and regain his strength. Fast forward 15 years to the year 1591, when he resurfaces. Christopher Belmont is older, but his son, Soleil Belmont, is now prepared to embrace the family's legacy of vampire hunting. However, Dracula kidnaps Soleil and seeks to harness the young boy's nascent powers to resurrect his malevolent kingdom. Through dark sorcery, Dracula transforms Soleil into a demon. In a desperate bid to save his son, an older Christopher Belmont wields the vampire killer whip once more, embarking on a quest to defeat Dracula and break the sinister spell that has engulfed Soleil. His journey is marked by the relentless pursuit of the undead warlord, preventing the resurgence of Dracula's empire and the continued corruption of his son. It should be noted that while the sequel is considered superior in many respects, it still carries some of the drawbacks of the initial Game Boy installment. Another dark era equals to the rise of the Dark Count, with another Belmont taking on the Killer Whip. The Simon Belmont era in 1690 AD Castlevania. We've now reached the original Nintendo Entertainment System release of Castlevania in 1986. Within this timeline where another century has passed and Dracula is resurrected once again during a period of darkness. This time it is Simon Belmont who rises to the occasion, brandishing the iconic whip to confront the hordes of darkness and ultimately face the primary antagonist, Dracula. While the plot of this game is relatively sparse, Dracula proves to be a formidable adversary prepared for the Belmonts. Just as Simon is on the verge of delivering a final blow, Dracula places a curse upon him, setting the stage for his return in the subsequent game. The original Castlevania title played a pivotal role in solidifying the franchise's status as one of the most iconic games in the world. It blended action and challenging gameplay while paying homage to classic Universal and Hammer monster films of the past. While there are undoubtedly games games in the series that surpass it in various aspects, the original Castlevania remains a classic that gamers can revisit as a testament to the timeless appeal of this iconic series. Plus, this initial confrontation would later see reinterpretations in games like Super Castlevania 4 1991 for the Super Nintendo and Castlevania Chronicles 2001 for the PlayStation. These reimagined versions updated Simon's classic battle with Dracula for newer generations with enhanced hardware, featuring redesigned levels and enemies to keep the experience fresh and engaging. Simon Belmont continued fight against the vampire Lord of Darkness, Castlevania II Simon's Quest in 1698 AD. Following Dracula's defeat in the original Castlevania gameplay, Simon's Quest, the 1987 NES game, continued Simon's adventures as a direct sequel set in 1698. 7 years after his initial encounter with Dracula, Simon discovers that the vampire cursed him with his dying breath, causing his body to gradually deteriorate. Simon Belmont now embarks on a treacherous journey through various manors, each guarding a fragment of the vampire's body. His mission is to obliterate these monstrous pieces, putting an end to Dracula's resurrection. This leads to an intense rematch with a reanimated Dracula, culminating in Simon's triumph and the lifting of the curse that had afflicted him. This hard-fought victory grants him the opportunity to live out the remainder of his days in relative peace. Simon's heroic journey results in Transylvania being liberated from the shadows that had plagued it. Simon's Quest is often regarded as a unique entry in the Castlevania series, with opinions divided among both enthusiasts and critics. While some praised its innovation, particularly the introduction of a particular day and night cycle, others found fault with its frequent interruptions, less memorable designs, and gameplay that fell short of the series' high standards, particularly when compared to the first and third games. However, Simon's enduring legacy would see him reappear in a classic Super Nintendo title, Super Castlevania 4, as the series revisited the events of the original game. Additionally, Simon would later make his debut as a playable character in the popular Super Smash Bros. Franchise. Simon's grandson rises to protect the family's legacy. The Juste Belmont era in 1748 AD, Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. 50 years after the events of Simon's Quest, Wallachia finds itself once again teetering on the brink of unrest. This time it is Simon Belmont's grandson, Juste Belmont, who rises to uphold the legacy of his esteemed family of vampire hunters. In the decades following Simon's dual triumphs over Dracula, his legendary feats have become well known, and the Belmont clan had regained their hero status in the region. Naturally, Juste grew up under the weight of immense expectations, constantly feeling the pressure to live up to his lineage's revered reputation. The Belmont's extraordinary status leads to a deep-seated jealousy in his best friend Maxime Kishshine. The tension between Juste and Maxime reaches a breaking point in the 2002 Game Boy Advance title Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. Here, Juste proves himself as a worthy successor to his heroic forebears when their mutual friend Lydie Erlanger is kidnapped by shadowy forces and imprisoned within Dracula's castle. At the same time, Maxime starts acting strangely after his ill-fated attempt to obliterate Dracula's remains independently. The unsettling truth comes to light that death has taken possession of Maxime, exploiting his latent envy toward Juste in a sinister scheme to resurrect Dracula. It was Maxime acting on death's behalf to kidnap Lydie and initiate the unholy ritual that would resurrect the megalomaniac vampire. When Juste discovers this dark secret, he faces off against Death and Dracula, determined to thwart their malevolent intentions. In the course of the conflict, Juste not only defeats these formidable foes, but also succeeds in rescuing Lydie from the clutches of the undead villains. His unwavering determination and courage shine through, restoring Maxime's senses and putting an end to the nefarious plot that threatened Wallachia once more. Juste Belmont also makes a surprise cameo in the Netflix series Castlevania Nocturne as Richter Belmont's estranged grandfather, who had given up on his legacy after losing his wife and his best friend to the darkness of being entwined with vampires. Although the first season shows very little of him, we do think there will be more to his character in the upcoming seasons. Count Dracula's return to malevolence after 100 years. Richter Belmont's era in 1792 AD Castlevania Rondo of Blood. 101 years after the original Castlevania events, the malevolent priest Shaft, yep, that's his name, orchestrates the resurrection of Dracula through a sinister satanic ritual so the vampire could renew his campaign to conquer Transylvania. To compound matters even more, Shaft also abducted 4 women from a nearby, offering them as prospective brides for Dracula. When Richter Richter, the latest Belmont heir, discovers that his beloved fiancée Annette is one of the hostages, he joins forces with Maria Renard, a woman endowed with extraordinary powers, and together they embark on a quest to rescue all the kidnapped women, confront Shaft, and ultimately fulfill the time-honored Belmont legacy by vanquishing Dracula. Events are portrayed in the 1993 TurboGrafx 16-game Castlevania Rondo of Blood, its 1995 Super Nintendo adaptation Castlevania Dracula X, and the 2007 enhanced remake Castlevania The Dracula X Chronicles released on the PlayStation Portable. For years, Rondo of Blood remained a rarity in the Castlevania series. Initially exclusive to Japan, it later received a scaled-down port for the SNES. It wasn't until 2007 that a faithful port of Rondo of Blood was released for the PlayStation Portable. And now, with the Castlevania Requiem collection available on modern gaming systems, this classic installment is accessible to a wider audience. This is particularly noteworthy because Rondo of Blood takes the traditional Castlevania formula and refines it akin to the achievements of Super Castlevania 4. It serves as one of the final instances in which the classic formula was utilized. Although the games do not go so deep into Richter's origin history, the Netflix spin-off Castlevania Nocturne gives us a fresh take on the adventures of Richter Belmont battling forces of night apart from Dracula. Within the animated series set at the onset of the French Revolution, Richter and his allies try to rid the world of eternal darkness, which is a courtesy of the vampire messiah Elizabeth Bathory, a vampirical goddess hell-bent on shrouding the entire world in darkness by eclipsing the sun so vampires can reign over mortals. Alucard makes a comeback to rescue Richter Belmont, Castlevania Symphony of the Night in 1797 AD. In 1797, 5 years after the events of Rondo of Blood, Richter Belmont mysteriously vanished while investigating Dracula's castle, which unexpectedly reappears in Transylvania during the events of the 1997 PlayStation game, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. In this game, Richter becomes an unwitting tool in the hands of the malevolent Shaft, who seeks to resurrect Dracula once again. With no other Belmont available, it falls to Alucard, who awakens from his deep slumber and returns centuries after his last battle to confront his father once more. Assisted by Maria Renard, Alucard vanquishes Shaft, saves Richter Belmont, and ultimately defeats Dracula once more. This recurring cycle of patricide must be a heavy burden for Alucard because he again goes back to his eternal slumber. Symphony of the Night stands as one of the most iconic titles in the Castlevania series and marks the origin of the Metroidvania-style gameplay that many future games in the series would adopt. The non-linear gameplay combined with RPG elements propelled Castlevania Symphony of the Night to its legendary status, often regarded as the best game in the franchise, despite some criticisms for its load times and voice acting. This enduring formula established by the game influenced countless Castlevania titles that followed. Now, this game sort of mimics the ending of Castlevania Nocturne's first season, when Richter, Maria, and Annette flee from Elizabeth's evil general Drolta Zuentis. The series ends with Alucard making a powerful comeback to help Richter stop the evil vampire queen and slaying Drolta with utmost pieces. I am just gonna liberally assume that the next season will most definitely be inspired by Symphony of the Night and go on to the next curveball. Era without the Belmonts, Castlevania Order of the Ecclesia, 19th century. Sometime during the 19th century, following Richter's exploits in Symphony of the Night, the Belmont clan mysteriously vanished into thin air, leaving a void in the battle against Dracula. In response to this disappearance, several powerful organizations emerged throughout Europe, gearing up to confront Dracula's inevitable return. Somewhere along the 19th century, a young woman named Shanoa, a devoted member of the Order of Ecclesia, undergoes rigorous training to master the organization's mystical glyphs. Eventually, she is chosen as the bearer of Dominus, a powerful glyph intended to be wielded as a weapon against Dracula. However, her world is shaken when a man named Albus is envious of her new position. This prompts him to pilfer the three components that constitute Dominus. In response to this act of betrayal, Shanoa sets off in pursuit of Albus, eventually managing to reclaim the stolen glyphs. Upon her return to Ecclesia's leader, Barlow, shocking revelation comes to light that Barlow intends to harness the power of the Dominus to resurrect Dracula. A heated confrontation ensues between Shanoa and Barlow, leading to the unintended release of Dracula's spirit from his remains, which had been concealed within Ecclesia's headquarters. This resurgence of Dracula results in his rebirth within a new host body. This tale unfolds in the 2008 Nintendo DS game Castlevania Order of Ecclesia. Later, Shanoa's past reveals the unsettling truth that Albus had kidnapped and conducted experiments on the imprisoned Belmont clan members, castles in a desperate attempt to master the glyphs and wield them effectively against Dracula without suffering the lethal consequences of using the magical devices. Shanoa's heroic intervention to rescue the captive Belmonts and rebelling against her old mentor Barlow proved crucial to thwart the Order's nefarious plan to sacrifice her with the glyphs to resurrect Dracula. With her tenacity and strength, Shanoa overcame the threats posed by both Barlow and the resurgent Dracula. In a climatic showdown, Shanoa ultimately triumphs over the Vampire Lord. In a selfless act of heroism, Albus sacrifices his own life to ensure Shanoa's survival using the glyphs. As a result, peace is restored to Europe and the legacy of the Belmont clan endures. The most shocking twist in the existing Castlevania timeline, the Morris era from 1897 AD, Castlevania Bloodlines. In a surprising twist, the 1994 Sega Genesis Mega Drive game Castlevania Bloodlines introduces an intriguing connection between Bram Stoker's renowned novel Dracula and the official Castlevania timeline. This game establishes the events of Stoker's classic as canonical to the Castlevania universe. In 1897, a courageous group of adventurers embarked on a mission, including an American named Quincy Morris, to pursue Dracula from London to Transylvania. The relentless pursuit culminates in a fierce battle that results in Dracula's destruction, but it comes at the heavy cost of Quincy's life. In a clever retcon from Stoker's original narrative, Quincy's young son, John Morris, bears witness to his father's valiant sacrifice alongside his closest friend, Eric Lecard. The game further reveals that the Morris family holds a distant connection to the Belmonts, adding an extra layer to the lineage. An interesting note is that Richter Belmont's relinquishment of the vampire killer whip to Quincy Morris, who used it to fend off Dracula in the period between games. In 1914, Dracula's niece Elizabeth and a malevolent sorceress named Drolta Zuentes conspired to instigate World War I as a means to propagate death and chaos and serve Dracula's resurrection. Bloodlines progresses to 20 years later, placing the storyline during the midst of the World War I in 1917, where the malevolent vampire Elizabeth Bartley is unveiled as the mastermind behind the orchestrated conflict strategically designed to sow chaos and provide the necessary blood for an unholy ritual aimed at resurrecting Dracula. Now adults and seasoned vampire hunters John and Eric confront Bartley's malevolent forces across a war-torn Europe. Their harrowing journey takes them from the ruins of Dracula's castle in Transylvania to Bartley's hideout in England. Although Bartley, with the aid of death, successfully resurrects Dracula before their defeat at the hands of John and Eric, the two hunters manage to thwart Dracula's return to full power in a fierce and climatic showdown. However, the lack of Belmont bloodline heritage in John Morris presents a significant challenge, as the use of the vampire killer whip gradually drains his life with each application. This takes a toll on him over the years, culminating in Morris's passing. Unfortunately, Bloodlines remains relatively overlooked as an exclusive title for the Sega Genesis. If it had been available on a wider range of platforms at its release, it might have achieved more significant recognition. The game is frequently praised for its distinctive setting and structure, with its World War I era backdrop and diverse European locations, providing a refreshing twist to the classic Super Castlevania 4 formula. Castlevania Nocturne takes its inspiration from this game's antagonist Elizabeth Bartley and redefines her character as the vampire messiah Elizabeth Bathory, who sends her general Drolta Zuentes across France to thwart the French Revolution while she prepares for vampire dominion over the world. The Morris clan continues to carry the Killer Whip. The era of Jonathan Morris in 1944 AD Castlevania Portrait of Ruin. This narrative is set 30 years later, where a vampire named Bronner seizes the opportunity not to resurrect Dracula, but to raise Dracula's castle and establish his rule as the new Prince of Darkness. Similarly to Bloodlines, the 2006 direct sequel Castlevania Portrait of Ruin for the Nintendo DS unfolds against the backdrop of a major global conflict, this time during the chaos of World War II in the year 1944. The game follows John Morris's son Jonathan, who had inherited a vampire killer whip from his late father, and a young sorceress named Charlotte Allen. These two intrepid heroes join forces and venture deep into Dracula's castle, where they confront the vampiric artist Bronner. This malevolent antagonist capitalizes on the bloodshed and destructive chaos of World War II to execute his sinister plans. He uses the war's energy to reconstruct the castle and infuse his artwork with unholy power. With his dark magic fueled by this global turmoil, Bronner's paintings serve as gateways to pocket dimensions from which he siphons raw power. His ultimate objective is to obliterate humanity, and in doing so, delay Dracula's resurrection, allowing him to lead this obsessive quest himself. Working closely together, Jonathan and Charlotte embark on a mission to rescue and restore Eric Lecard's daughters, Stella and Loretta, who had been transformed into vampires by Bronner, while seeking vengeance for their father's demise at the hands of the artist. After successfully defeating Bronner and thwarting his malevolent plans, Dracula's resurrection resurrection proceeds without any interference. However, the vampire warlord's reawakening is swiftly met with opposition and vanquishment at the hands of Jonathan and Charlotte. Finally, peace is restored to Transylvania and the four vampire hunters depart from the ruins of Dracula's castle, allowing Eric's spirit to find peace upon the restoration of his daughters. In Portrait of Ruin, Jonathan Morris and Charlotte Allen unite to unlock the true potential of the vampire killer whip, eliminating its toxic effects from the wielder. This particular game stands out from the typical Symphony of the Night formula by introducing a novel gameplay mechanic with simultaneous control of two characters. This innovation not only adds a unique dimension to the gameplay but also incorporates puzzle-solving elements and presents new challenges. Combined with a compelling storyline that continues from Bloodlines, the game proves to be one of the standout titles of the handheld era, offering a fitting conclusion to the legacies of the Belmont and Morris Bloodlines. It provided fans with a satisfying ending before the Lords of Shadow series initiated a Castlevania reboot. The rebirth of Dracula through a mysterious reincarnation, Soma Cruz's era in 2035 AD, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. In 1999, Juste Belmont faced his own decisive confrontation with Dracula, ultimately slaying the vampire and seemingly bringing an end to his family's age-old feud with the Dark Lord. But then, 36 years later in 2035, a baffling event unfolded as Dracula's castle mysteriously reappeared on the outskirts of Tokyo. During a solar eclipse, transfer high school student Soma Cruz and his friend Mina Hakuba were mysteriously drawn into the castle. Inside the castle, they encountered Julius, Alucard, and the young witch Yoko Belnades. It was during this meeting that the group learned the shocking truth that Soma is the reincarnation of Dracula himself, and his dark heritage posed a severe threat. The twist in the story reveals that Graham Jones, a man who believed himself to be the reincarnation of Dracula, was nothing more than a deluded fanatic. If he were to succumb to the darkness within him, it could result in the full resurrection of Dracula. However, Soma manages to conquer and destroy the evil within him, preventing the genuine resurrection of Dracula. Naturally, Soma Cruz takes the spotlight in the 2003 Game Boy Advance title Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. Despite his unholy lineage, Soma is determined to reject his cursed birthright and harness his supernatural abilities for the cause of good. The setting of Aria of Sorrow is in Japan, following Soma Cruz as he becomes embroiled in a new war against evil. He forms a team with Julius Belmont, who has taken up the family legacy once more, along with Yoko Belnades and Alucard, who operates under the alias of Genya Arikado. From a gameplay perspective, Aria of Sorrow continued the beloved Metroidvania style that fans have come to appreciate. It adhered to the simple principle of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. At the same time, it was evident that some fans were beginning to experience a sense of franchise fatigue by this point. Compounding this, the story introduced concepts and ideas that diverged significantly from the traditional Castlevania narrative, which resulted in a degree of alienation among certain fans. The last run of vampirical malevolence in the main Castlevania canon, Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow in 2036 AD. Soma's journey continues in the 2005 direct sequel Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, designed for the Nintendo DS and set 1 year later in 2036. It has been a year since the events surrounding Dracula during the eclipse, and Soma Cruz is enjoying a period of tranquility after having successfully resisted becoming the new Dracula. However, this respite is short-lived when a cult leader named Celia Fortner confronts Soma in broad daylight and demands that he follow her back to Dracula's castle. To protect his loved one, Soma enters the castle alone. Soma's old allies Yoko Belnades, Julius Belmont, and Genya Arikado also arrive with the intention of thwarting the cult's plans. Now, this cult is determined to sacrifice him in order to resurrect the dark vampire spirit lurking within him. In their nefarious pursuit, the cult also threatens Soma's friends. To confront this dire situation, the hero reunites with his former allies and ventures into a replica of Dracula's castle, where the cult has set up its base of operations. With Soma's arrival in the castle, Celia initiates her scheme to bring about the emergence of a new Dark Lord. She endeavors to provoke the revival of Dracula by persuading Soma to embrace his inner darkness. If this approach fails, she plans to have another heir of Dracula's power eliminate him. Despite Celia's efforts, Soma resists the temptation to turn to the dark side. However, another candidate, Dmitry Blinov, who has copied Soma's dominance power, ultimately kills Celia by absorbing her soul. Followed by this, Yoko, Julius Arikado, and Soma join forces to track down Dmitry, but their efforts prove futile. In his pursuit of acquiring souls similar to Soma's, Dmitry loses control and undergoes a transformation into a colossal monster called Menace, which really is composed of all the souls he had collected. The culmination of the story unfolds in a final confrontation against Dmitry as Menace, who served as the ultimate boss battle. After a grueling battle, Soma defeats Menace, resists the allure of darkness, vanquishes his inner Dracula once again, and returns home. This marked the conclusion of the original Castlevania chronology, and it also signified the end of the Metroidvania era of Castlevania. Some fans felt that the series had deviated too far from the gothic ambience that had made it so beloved that even the makers felt it was driven out too long, finally marking an end to the main canon of the Castlevania timeline. Rounding up the non-canonical events of the Castlevania franchise. As we have mentioned before, not all Castlevania games are part of the official timeline recognized by Konami. Some titles have been quietly removed from continuity after their release. For instance, the 1997 Game Boy title Castlevania Legends aimed to provide the origin of the Belmont's conflict with Dracula, with Sonia Belmont facing the vampire during his initial rampage. However, this game was later rendered non-canonical by Lament of Innocence. Similarly, the two Castlevania games for the Nintendo 64, along with 2001's Castlevania Circle of the Moon on the Game Boy Advance, were excluded from continuity by franchise producer Koji Igarashi. According to Igarashi, these titles were considered side stories that conflicted with the canon established by the main installments of the series. Again, in 2010, the franchise underwent a significant reboot with a new timeline that started with Castlevania Lords of Shadow. This reboot provided an alternate origin for Dracula and the Belmont clan. In this new timeline, Gabriel Belmont became a vampire and assumed the name Dracula after failing to rescue his late wife Marie in the year 1047. Dracula's conflict with his descendants who retained the Belmont name was explored further in the 2013 sequel Castlevania Lords of Shadow, Mirror of Fate, and concluded in Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. In the latter game, Dracula teamed up with his vampiric son Alucard in the present day to defeat Satan and prevent him from unleashing hell on Earth. This installment also introduced Victor, the last of the Belmont lineage. Marvelous verdict. Over the years, Castlevania's influence has left a mark on numerous games, spanning both indie and AAA titles. In 2018, this influence was particularly pronounced, with games like Dead Cells, Tassim, and much more, all drawing inspiration from the Castlevania series. After the success of Castlevania Nocturne, we can clearly see a significant resurgence of Castlevania-related content, reaffirming the enduring love for the series. While it is uncertain whether a new Castlevania adventure is on the horizon within the gaming arena, one thing is clear. Fans are eagerly anticipating to witness how Elizabeth Bathory fills in enormous shoes of Count Dracula in Nocturne's upcoming seasons. Maybe she will resurrect a big bad vampire again in the spin-off series? What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment box below. And as always, if you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one.